It's been a very challenging week as a manager of people this week. On Monday, one of my employees came to me and told me his father passed away on Sunday. First thing I did was look at him and say to myself, "What are you doing here?" And he told me that he thought that he could handle it, that coming to work would be a distraction, take his mind off what happened. Well, he sent me an instant message and said, "Mike, I don't know what I'm doing with my work today." And I said, "Well, let's talk about it." And then he told me, maybe it's because my dad passed away. And I said to him, let's go in a room and talk. And I convinced him that grieving for someone you love and someone you lose, especially someone as close as a parent, God forbid a child or a spouse or brother or sister, it's anyone that you care about. The biggest impact, no matter what your belief is even if you believe that they're in a better place, or even if they were suffering, or even if you think that death is just, a stepping stone to something greater. To me, the biggest loss is the loss of having that day-to-day contact. To be able to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, what's up, Dad?" Now, my dad died 20 years ago, and I've written about it and talked about it in countless emails. Countless blog posts and videos, maybe even in some emails. And while I've gone through the process of grieving for him and actually changed my life through his death, became a better person, the one thing that I miss still to this day, 20 years later, is my inability to pick up a phone and talk to my dad, to shake his hand, give him a hug, to have an interaction with him. So I sent my buddy home from work with a message that the best thing you could do right now is the opposite of what you think, and that is, don't take your mind off it. Embrace it. Embrace it until your heart aches, until you can't stop crying. Because until you deal with your grief and allow your emotions, your body, your mind, your spirit, even your physical sense, until you allow yourself to go through that process, you will not be able to move on. And there's a long challenges ahead for someone who's just lost somebody. But a few days after that, I get a phone call from another employee of mine. His wife went into labor. Joy. After the death of someone's father, it's amazing that we can see the full cycle of life. People die, babies are born. It keeps going on and on. Then more heartache struck as I get more phone calls and communication, and I found out that the poor child is stillborn. Imagine the grief that this young man in his early 20s is going through. And imagine the same thing that he must do as the young man who lost his father has to do. And that is to go through the stages. For someone who loses a child at childbirth, you might feel anger, which is one of the phases. You might ask yourself and your higher power, why? Why me? Why am I being tested? And you should. You might have disbelief. You will probably no doubt say, "I don't believe this has happened until I see the fact that this is really happening. I do not believe it." Believe me, you need to go through all the stages. And then you go through the crying. Then you go through the anger. It took years for me to get over the anger of my father's death. Well, you could say, "Mike, why would you be angry that your dad died?" Well, my dad died in different circumstances. He was only 57. He drank, smoked, and ate himself to death. He died with a heart that was so strong that it finally gave out only because of his insistence and his weakness with nicotine. Only because he couldn't face his demons the way I have and the way I try to help millions of people live Life 365 face theirs. So Besides the grief, the heartache, the shock, the disbelief, my longest duration of the stages of grief was anger. And I felt that I lost several years of my life to that anger because I did not forgive my dad for not taking care of himself and for leaving me and my family way too soon. But as the years went by, and as I understood that my anger wasn't doing anyone any good, and that my criticism of my father was because he was too weak to understand, to overcome his weaknesses and his temptations and his desires, that motivated me to change my life and to create Live Life 365 so that I could be there for people like my dad who need help, for people like myself who need to understand how to move on, for folks like the young man who came to me early this week and lost his dad, to the other young man who has to deal with the heart-wrenching grief of losing a child. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Through loss, we get strength. My dad's death, and hopefully all these deaths that I've described today, will change lives for the better. It's a long struggle ahead for those guys, but I can tell them firsthand that they can make it. So can you. Peace.